Whew. It is hot out there today. Oh, steamy. It is summertime in the South. So I think in today's video, I want to kind of go into the history of the Democratic Party. Because I know with a lot of the protest plan and a lot of the liberals, I don't think that they look at the history of their party or why their party even came to be. Before there were Democrats and Republicans, there was the Democratic Republican Party. And Martin Van Buren, who was our 8th president, he was also our only president that spoke English as a second language, because he lived in a Dutch colony or a Dutch community, and they spoke Dutch within those communities. So you got to realize our country was very young at the time, and there were a lot of people here from different areas. And anyway, Martin Van Buren, due to the factions, the different factions, and the fractious nature of the Democratic Republican Party at the time, Martin Van Buren decided to create the Democratic Party so that Andrew Jackson could run for president on a ticket, because it didn't look like he was going to get the nomination if he ran on the Democratic Republican ticket. So Martin Van Buren came up with this solution. Now, Andrew Jackson was a slave owner. So the Democratic Party was not, founded for any other reason really than to solve a problem about a presidential candidate being able to run. Anyway, fast forward to a few years, the Civil War. Now, what a lot of people don't realize, you know Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln, his first, back in the election of 1860, his running mate was a man by the name of Hannibal Hamlin, who was a conservative, a Republican. They were abolitionists, of course. They did not want slavery in the new territories. And of course, the South had other ideas. You got to realize the South was making a lot of money exporting cotton to England, who had a lot of mills, especially like in the Manchester area. So if anyone's ever read North and South, not the one about the Civil War, but the one with Margaret Hale and Robert Thornton, it's a British book. I can't think of the author. I cannot think of her name. Oh man, but it's during the time of Dickens and all that. But she wrote the book North and South. And anyway, England had all these cotton mills. They don't grow cotton in England. It's not found there. So the South was doing big business with England. And of course, with the cotton mills, the people had their own set of issues with the fibers getting into the lungs and gooing them up and causing issues. So all the way around, cotton, while it's needed and all that, not the way it was grown and gotten and processed, that was reprehensible. But that's the past. We can't go undo it. What we can do is try to rise above it. Now, when I say rise above it, I don't mean go tear up, loot, and protest. I mean, anyone who wants to gather and peacefully assemble, you have that right under the First Amendment. But before you start claiming parties and before you start going, this party's for me, look at the history. Now, getting back to what I was saying, in the election of 1860, Abraham Lincoln had a conservative Republican running mate, Hannibal Hamlin. I believe that was his name. Now, in the election of 1864, which none of the Confederate states at the time participated in, but they were trying to get the Union back together, get the Confederate states back into the Union, they picked Andrew Johnson, who was a Democrat from Tennessee, who he stayed loyal to the Union. And they thought, well, if we get him to run on this ticket, maybe we can get, you know, the South back. What they didn't tell you is that, oh no, my son is wanting to give me just a few minutes, baby boy. What they didn't tell you is that the Democrats were for slavery at the time. They were very much for slavery. So they made Andrew Johnson, they got him to run with Lincoln on this ticket. I'm sorry, I got distracted by my son. And he did. And they won. And again, no southern state voted in this election. But they were trying to get them back in, get the Union back together. Well, of course, we all know what happened a few months after, after Lincoln and Johnson took office again, which Lincoln was the incumbent, but Johnson, when they took office, Lincoln was assassinated. I think, if I'm not mistaken, at that time, like we do, Inauguration Day is on like the January 21st. Back then it was like they did it around the 1st of March. So shortly after taking office for the second time, Lincoln was assassinated. Now Lincoln, who's a Republican, was trying to get the 13th and 14th Amendment. They were trying to ratify the Constitution with the 13th and 14th Amendment, which granted former slaves, citizenship, and granted former male slaves the right to vote. Now, after Lincoln's assassination, Johnson did see that legislation go through. And if you ever doubt the Democratic Party's ties to slavery, go look up the Dred Scott decision. The conservative judges, which there weren't that many in the Supreme Court at the time, decided that, slaves were not property. It was the Democratic judges that, just go look up the decision. That's all I'm going to say. Don't take my word for it. Go do your homework. So after that time, the South saw, more former slaves becoming, get active in politics and doing very well. And then Andrew Johnson kind of reverted back to his Democratic ways and started taking some of the protections that they did have And once they withdrew all the troops from, because the Union occupied the South during radical Reconstruction. But once the troops were all removed, and I think they removed the troops as a condition for another election, and, oh my goodness, what was it, Rutherford B. Hayes? What is that? I'm gonna look it up. I want to say it was Rutherford B. Hayes. As a condition of them not contesting the election, they withdrew all the Union troops. And I got it right here. Let's see. Nope, there he goes. So I believe it was a condition of the election of Rutherford B. Hayes to withdraw the rest of the Union troops. Well, when that happened, then you started seeing the KKK come out. They started intimidating former slaves. They were trying to vote. The ones that had taken office, they were quickly removed from office and replaced by a bunch of Southern Democrats who were pretty much racist and scapegoating the slaves when, it wasn't their fault. They didn't ask to be brought over here. But so all these people going, I'm for the Democratic Party. I'm for the Democratic Party. Go look at the history of the Democratic Party. And don't tell me that they have switched, because even back in the day, the Republican Party was anti-slavery, abolitionists. They were within, the Democratic Party were for the rights of owning other people that they felt were inferior. The KKK was kind of like an unofficial police. And, I mean, so when you talk about rights, they weren't for rights. In fact, they were all for segregation. And it really didn't start to change until the civil rights movements. And John F. Kennedy, a Democrat, but he wanted a change. Well, after his assassination, Lyndon B. Johnson kind of took over that and decided that the way to they realized they were losing the battle, but he wanted to keep people happy in the South, but he also wanted to appeal to the voters, the people of color that voted. So that's when they started kind of coming up with all these welfare systems to keep this community in the life which they thought they should be accustomed. So instead of, opening up avenues and opportunities, you put them on welfare. They started offering welfare, but you could only get it if you were not married and you had children, and you made under this much money. I mean, they offered incentives to break up the families, and this is why you have the problems today. because that was the whole goal of that, was to keep that group dumbed down, keep them from having a nuclear family, give them a little bit of money, and keep the votes. But they tell you, but they told them they were doing it for their own good. Well, instead of doing that, why didn't you bring in programs that would have trained more doctors? I mean, you have very good, strong, some of our best inventors were people that were of, former slaves, or people that were of what they saw as the inferior class, which that is BS. God tells me I ain't above anybody, and I ain't, when it comes to Judgment Day, you really think God's going to care what color my skin is? No, because I won't have it at that time. I'll be a spiritual body. So as far as like this whole superior, inferior race thing, that is BS. But anyway, I just asked for people to go look it up. Go look up the history. I mean, I could, kind of gave it a real short, a very short kind of, because I don't want to talk on here for an hour about history. But then you could have brought in more programs, better forms of education, invested in these communities. And who knows, instead of putting them on the welfare system and giving them money with conditions that you don't have a nuclear family, that you don't have, make it so you've got the guaranteed money as long as you don't go get a job, or get a job that pays this much. And I mean, that was a disservice. But they wanted to make sure that they had control over those votes and take it away from the Republicans. And, they're good at deceiving. A lot of politicians are. That's why Mom Greenie always said, never trust a preacher getting into politics. He ain't doing it for his flock. He's doing it for himself, and has foregone his calling, has thrown it away. It might be called by the other one at this point. That was my Greenie's opinion. I mean, I guess a preacher could get into politics, but you can't play in that game. And it's not a cult that you want to be in. I promise you that. I had some members of my family in politics. That's not a cult you want to be in. And again, which ones do we really remember? The ones that are killed? The ones that get caught doing bad things? So really, I mean, if you're putting your stock into being immortalized through that kind of power, well, you better be prepared to be killed, or you better be prepared to get caught doing bad things. I mean, if you ever go and watch a video on how all these dictators died, oh my gosh, shit is crazy. Yeah, not good. Not good at all. I mean, I'm not laughing, it's just like, oh my gosh. They die in these crazy ways, and a lot of it's paranoia surrounding them. And it's like, all that power that you quote unquote got, you end up dying being fearful that someone's trying to take that power, but you end up dying anyway, whether or not they are. But anyway, that is just my take on things. I need to let my son in here because he is wanting to get in here and, I guess, watch TV with me. But I did want to hop on and do a video and yeah, just I'll get better at this as I go on. I'll get more comfortable talking on camera. Um, just bear with me. But if you got any history facts that you want to know, if I don't know them, I'll look it up. Look it up. But and double check me on. I do believe it was on the condition of the election of Rutherford B. Hayes that they withdrew the Union troops. But double check me on that. And that's what I always said. Check me. Alright, I am signing off. And everybody have a good night. And also remember, it's not physical death you need to be afraid of. It's your spiritual mortality that you need to watch. Satan is bent on destruction. Apollyon and Abaddon, as he is called in Revelations 9, verse 11, Greek and Hebrew, which is the destructor. He is bent on destroying God's children. He's bent on getting us to destroy each other. He's doing a pretty good job of that too. But again, it's never too late to change. Well, if you're alive and you've got a breath in your body today, you can reverse course. Now, I don't know about tomorrow. I don't know about 10 minutes from now. But don't wait. Don't put it off. Because, again, you don't know if you're going to drop dead in a heartbeat, go boom, and be dead before you hit the floor. So, do your research. Pray to God every day. Pray to the Father. Don't pray to God, but pray to the Father. Pray to our Father. And pray in Yeshua's name. And, love you, and I'll be on here later on this week. Thank you.